They said nothing was there. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the sterile confidence of data, a conclusion drawn from decades of maritime charts, satellite passes, and acoustic surveys. This particular expanse of the Pacific was officially designated as a null zone, a void, not just empty of notable features, but fundamentally uninteresting, a place the world had looked at, shrugged, and agreed to ignore. The official designation was Oceanic Pole of Inaccessibility, but even that felt too dramatic. Internally, we just called it the blank. It was a region so vast and so consistently uniform that sending a vessel to survey it was deemed a categorical waste of fuel, time, and resources. The consensus was absolute, built on a foundation of seemingly irrefutable evidence. Nothing to see, nothing to find, no records. Not a single entry in the historical archives indicated anything other than deep, unremarkable water. We cross-referenced everything. Naval logs from the age of sail, submarine patrol routes from the Cold War, commercial shipping lanes, even restricted geological survey data. The result was always the same, a perfect, unbroken silence. There were no shipwrecks, no submerged volcanic vents, no unusual magnetic field variations. It was as if this section of the planet had been deliberately bypassed by history, geology, and biology alike. It wasn't just that there were no records of anything significant. There were no records, period. It was a statistical anomaly, a geographic ghost, a place that existed on the map only as a placeholder for the absence of information. No activity. Our passive listening arrays, sensitive enough to detect the heartbeat of a blue whale from 1,000 kilometers away, heard only the baseline hum of the deep ocean. The background radiation was perfectly uniform. The water temperature was stable, conforming exactly to predictive models for that depth and latitude. We ran spectral analysis on the water column, searching for anomalous chemical traces. Nothing. We scanned for faint electronic signals, rogue transmissions, anything that might suggest a hidden installation or a piece of lost technology. Again, nothing. It was the textbook definition of ambient noise. The area was, for all intents and purposes, asleep. It was a control group for the rest of the planet's chaotic, vibrant oceans. A perfect, undisturbed baseline. No reason to scan. Every protocol, every directive, every piece of operational logic argued against it. Active scanning is not a trivial act. It's the equivalent of shouting in a library. You don't do it without cause. It expends enormous energy, and more importantly, it announces your presence to anything that might be listening. Given the complete and total lack of any preliminary indicators, pushing that button was unjustifiable. It was a violation of procedure, a flight of fancy, a search for something in a place certified to contain nothing. It was an action without a preceding justification, an effect without a cause. And so, for a long time, we didn't. The cursor hovered. The system waited. The silence of the void was mirrored by the silence in the control room. Until we did. The decision wasn't born from new data. It was born from a hunch, a feeling, the kind of intuitive leap that algorithms and protocols are designed to eliminate. It was the simple, nagging question. What if the emptiness itself was a form of camouflage? What if the perfect silence wasn't an absence of signal, but a signal in itself? It was a deeply unscientific thought, but it was persistent. So against all operational doctrine, the command was given. A single, high-energy, multi-spectrum pulse. A question fired into the abyss. We weren't expecting an answer. We were simply checking a box, satisfying a human curiosity that the data could not extinguish. The system executed the command, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint electronic hum of the sweep. The ocean responded. There was no delay, no travel time for the echo to return. The response was not an echo. It was a reply. The moment our pulse left the array, a signal came back. It wasn't a reflection of our own energy. It was something new, something generated. It was sharp, coherent, and impossibly clear. The silence of the void was shattered, not by the echo of our own voice, but by a voice answering back. The system, which had been programmed to filter out expected returns, was momentarily stunned. It flagged the signal as an anomaly of the highest order. It was as if we had thrown a pebble into a pond, and instead of ripples, the pond had thrown a perfectly carved stone back at us. Immediately, the return signal was synchronous with our own transmission, a physical impossibility for a passive object. The energy signature was unlike anything in our databases. It was not geological, not biological, and it didn't match any known human or non-human technology. It was structured, complex. The single spike on the display was a simplification. The raw data was a cascade of information, a dense packet of structured code that our systems were not equipped to understand. It was a message, written in a language we had never seen. The system struggled to categorize it, cycling through labels, unidentified, non-terrestrial, artificial, before settling on the only term that fit: deliberate. Same coordinates. The signal originated from the precise geometric center of the null zone, the one place that should have been the most empty of all. We ran a triangulation check from 3 separate sensor platforms. The result was unequivocal. The location was fixed, stationary, and deep. Miles beneath the surface, something had answered our call. The very heart of the void was not a void at all. It was a source. This wasn't a ghost in the machine or a sensor malfunction. The physics were undeniable. Something was down there. Something that had, until this exact moment, chosen to remain perfectly silent. Different story. The narrative had changed. The book of the ocean, which had a blank page, now had a single cryptic sentence written on it. The world was no longer as we had mapped it. Our understanding, our charts, our entire framework for this region was rendered obsolete in a single microsecond. The blank was no longer blank. It was occupied. The question was no longer, is there anything there? The question was now, what is it? And a darker, more pressing question followed immediately behind it. Why was it hiding? The calm, sterile environment of the control room was gone, replaced by a palpable tension. The data on the screen was no longer just data. It was evidence. Evidence of a profound and unsettling contradiction. No error. The first assumption is always that your equipment has failed. We ran every diagnostic imaginable. Level 1, Level 2, deep core hardware checks. We rerouted the signal through redundant systems. We had the system analyze its own performance in real time. Every single test came back clean. The arrays were functioning at peak efficiency. The software was uncorrupted. The network was stable. The machine was telling us, with unwavering certainty, that what it was reporting was real. It was a difficult conclusion to accept because it meant the problem wasn't in the technology. The problem was in our understanding of reality. The machine was not wrong. We were. No interference. The next logical step was to check for external influence. Could it be a sophisticated spoof? A rival power testing new electronic warfare capabilities? We scanned for jamming signals, for reflected energy from satellites, for atmospheric distortions. The environment was pristine. The signal was not a ghost created by another system. It was clean, isolated, and self-contained. It originated from the coordinates, and only from the coordinates. We had, in effect, proven a negative. It wasn't our equipment, and it wasn't anyone else's. That left only one possibility, however improbable. The signal was exactly what it appeared to be, a direct, powerful, and deliberate transmission from the deep ocean. So we ran it again, this time with a different vector, a different frequency, a different modulation. We were testing its consistency. A random glitch would not be repeatable. A natural phenomenon might fluctuate. But if this was a deliberate intelligence, it might react. We sent a second pulse, a different question. We held our breath. The system was primed. The filters were ready. We were no longer just observing. We were interacting. We were prodding something ancient and unknown, trying to gauge its nature. The seconds after the pulse went out were the longest we had ever experienced. Same result. The response was identical. Not similar. Identical. down to the last bit of data, the last flicker of energy. It was a perfect echo of the first response, despite our transmission being different. This was the moment that true fear began to creep in. This wasn't a simple stimulus response. It wasn't an animal reacting to a noise. This was controlled. It was a choice. It had chosen to send the exact same message twice. It was as if it was saying, "Yes, you heard me correctly the first time. This is what I am." The repeatability removed all doubt. This was not noise. This was a statement. That's when it stopped being noise. Our pattern recognition algorithms, designed to find order in chaos, went into overdrive. The signal wasn't just structured. It was layered with breathtaking complexity. It contained mathematical constants, pi, the golden ratio, embedded within fractal geometries. It was a signal that was designed to be recognized as intelligent by any species that understood mathematics. It was a universal greeting card and a warning. The sheer density of the information was staggering. It was a library, an encyclopedia, a declaration, all compressed into a single, elegant pulse of energy. It was no longer a mystery. It was a revelation. The depth held steady, 8,400 meters. The pressure at that depth is over 800 times that of the surface. It's a realm of absolute darkness and crushing force, where our most advanced submersibles struggle to survive. Yet, the signal was coming from there, clear and strong, unaffected by the colossal weight of the water above it. Whatever was down there was not just surviving in that environment. It was thriving. It had mastered a realm we could barely touch. The depth itself was a statement of power, of technology far beyond our own. And something moved. It wasn't on the sonar. The sonar was still locked onto the single stationary point. This was different. Our gravimetric sensors, which measure minute changes in the local gravitational field, registered a shift, a colossal displacement of mass. Something unimaginably large had just changed its position in the abyss. It was slow, deliberate, and silent. It was a movement that did not register on any other sensor. It was a ghost, a leviathan moving in the dark, and we had only seen its shadow in the equations of gravity. It hadn't reacted to our ping. It had reacted to the fact that we had understood the ping, not on the screen. The realization was chilling. The entity wasn't just broadcasting, it was observing the observer. The signal it sent back wasn't just a reply. It was a diagnostic. It was pinging us to see what we were, what we understood. The freeze in our system wasn't a glitch. It was a handshake. A brief, impossibly fast intrusion where it read our reaction. It saw that we had recognized the intelligence in its signal. It knew that we knew. The game had changed. We were no longer the explorers. We were the discovered. In the behavior. The proof was in its actions. The initial silence. The perfect, instantaneous reply. The repetition of the message. The shift in mass only after we had decoded the pattern. It was a carefully orchestrated sequence of events. A conversation. It was testing us, learning about us from our own signals. It was intelligent, patient, and methodical. And it was now aware that its cover was blown. The perfect emptiness had been a perfect lie, maintained for millennia, and we had stumbled right through it. The only logical next step was containment. Not of it, but of the knowledge of it. So we didn't approach. The prime directive became clear. Do not provoke. Do not engage. Do not reveal our full capabilities. We were ants who had just discovered the boot hanging over our anthill. Any further action was not only pointless, it was suicidal. The order was given to cease all active transmissions, to return to passive listening only, to pull back our assets and pretend we had seen nothing. The priority shifted from discovery to concealment. We had to put the lid back on Pandora's box. We removed the location. The coordinates were scrubbed from every log. The raw data was encrypted with quantum keys and moved to a black site server with no external network connection. The official report for the operation was falsified, stating, "Equipment malfunction, no usable data obtained." The blank was officially recertified as blank. We were erasing our own discovery from our own records, building a wall of silence around the most important event in human history. Restricted the file. Access was limited to a need-to-know basis, and the decision was made that nobody else needed to know. The psychological impact of this knowledge was deemed too high. The geopolitical ramifications were incalculable. How do you tell the world that its entire understanding of its own planet is wrong? How do you explain that there is a power of unimaginable scale and intelligence dwelling in our own oceans, a power that has remained hidden by choice? You don't. You classify it. You bury it under layers of bureaucracy and secrecy. Sealed the data. The final step. The file was sealed, not to be opened without a unanimous directive from the highest authority. A directive that would likely never come. The truth was now a prisoner of our own making. We had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had not only looked back, it had shown us our own insignificance. And we had blinked. We chose ignorance over truth, because the truth was too vast, too terrifying to comprehend. The secret would be kept. To anyone else, it looks empty. And so the official story remains unchanged. The charts are still blank. The records are still silent. The zone is still a void. To the rest of the world, to the satellites passing overhead, to the ships that give it a wide berth, nothing is there. The perfect camouflage was restored, this time with our active participation. We became the guardians of the lie. We maintained the illusion of an empty ocean. But the ocean disagreed. Because nothing doesn't react like that. Nothing doesn't learn. Nothing doesn't hide. And this wasn't the only empty zone. After the incident, we started looking at other, similar voids across the globe. Other places certified as empty and uninteresting. And in one of them, we saw another hint. A flicker in the data. A whisper in the silence. A single, faint spike that vanished as quickly as it appeared. A sign that we were not dealing with a single entity, but perhaps a network. A hidden kingdom. Which leads to the final, terrifying question. Why was it listed empty? Was it a mistake? Or was the record deliberately falsified long before we ever looked? Part 2 is next.